On Garden Design podcast with Fleur and Sachi, where we chat about what makes a garden great and we try to inspire and make designing accessible to anyone who's interested in gardens, plants and chatting. Your hosts are long-time friends Fleur and Sachi, who bring a fresh perspective and their life experience to designing gardens as a second career. You can find us on Facebook and Insta. We'd love to have you subscribe so you know when the next episode is available. So, hi Sachi, what are we chatting about today?
Hi Fleur. I think this is probably one of the most, I don't want to say exciting because that's probably overstating it.
Because they're all exciting.
They're all exciting, I know. This is all about excitement and, thrills and hanging on the edge of your seat. No, this is a podcast, though, that is very much after my own heart. I'm a thrifty type and I've got those peasant roots, which is why I like gardening. But it's about creating your garden on a budget. So I think there's something in it for everyone, really. Who doesn't like a bargain?
Oh, I love a bargain.
Exactly.
I almost measure my success in my own garden anyway by how fantastic I make things look on the cheapest possible way to get there.
I'm not sure you should be admitting to this on air.
Well, it's funny because, as a garden designer, I don't tend to design other people's gardens on a budget because, you've got this responsibility to have it done, in industry standards and to, make sure that people who are doing it, they're properly qualified, therefore they're properly paid and they're insured and all the rest of it. But when you do your own garden, this is when you can save a mozza.
That's right. Anyway, so why are we talking about this? We've talked a bit about why we're talking about this. Let's get serious about it.
Yeah, and I think this is because most people want to do their gardens for a budget price.
Do you think so?
Well, I think people.
So sure.
Okay. No, here we go. Some people underestimate the cost of landscaping. In fact, most people underestimate the cost of landscaping. And I say to clients generally, what is the value of your home and land and house?
Yep.
And if you're doing a landscaping of your entire garden space, you should account for 10% of that land and house value.
And then if you add on a pool, you can double that.
Oh, well, if you add on a pool, you're starting at kind of minimum about $80,000.
Yeah, that's right. So it can be really expensive. And a lot of people, when they think about doing their garden, really haven't budgeted that. And in this day of inflation and rising mortgages, we're bringing some little tidbits for you to manage that, that pressure that we're all feeling.
And this is not for everybody. Some people just need the professionals to do it. Some people are time poor, skill poor, and they need somebody to go and completely do their garden. And I get that. That's my whole industry.
Yeah.
However, this podcast is really about those listeners who want to take ownership over their own garden journey and they want to do it themselves and they want to do it well. Yeah. So we're about saying to you, you can do this. We're going to give you a few tips and tricks how you can do it well and how you can do it thriftily and how you can be incredibly satisfied and a great journey.
The other additional benefits in this for everyone is the satisfaction. You can follow trends if you want to because you can always change it if you don't like it. And then finally, you can get fit. Gardening's great exercise, particularly when you're swinging a mattock and doing some serious shoveling.
Yes, and when we're talking about DIY gardens, we're talking about physical labour.
Absolutely.
So, if you're not fit for it, well, you soon will be, or you'll fall apart and you shouldn't be doing it. So know your limitations.
That's
because,
a good one.
When I redid my entire garden about 6-7 years ago, I was about as fit as I've ever been. I just had cement abs because I was doing so much digging.
They were literally because she was using so much cement. No, I'm kidding. But let's move on to this. So what is it that we're talking about here in terms of what you can do to actually, use things that you find more, I guess, that are cheaper?
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a nice way of putting that. No, it's just about being cheap.
That's right. Well, I think we should break this up. And so when we're thinking about creating your garden on a budget, we're thinking about stages. So there's the design stage, there's the build stage, there's the acquiring the materials for that, the planting and the maintenance. So if we think about these different stages and then let's talk about how we can approach each one in a budget way.
Well, what can we do in the design space so that you don't have to pay an expensive landscape architect or garden designer?
Yeah. I speak from experience here because I came into being a landscape designer from my experience of doing my own garden before I had any skills and qualifications. And that just gave me the taste, so I loved it. And what I did, and what's available to everybody is adult courses that are short courses that are targeted. That's it, and that's the sort of thing. But the one I want to really talk about, which I loved, and I think it's out there for a lot of people, are ones that are run by your local TAFE. And for those who aren't from Australia, that is a
College of Advanced Education sort of
skill-based.
Yeah, that's right. Competency-based.
Competency-based, yeah. Yep. So I went and did this course that was run in the evenings. It was about 2 or 3 hours once a week over about 6 to 8 weeks. And in that time, it was called Garden Design. And each week you stepped through the basics and the building blocks. And you talked about materials and you talked about layout and design. And we did little exercises and just learnt so much that by the end of that course, I had a design for my garden.
But not everyone's into doing courses. That said, I should actually say there are some great online courses as well. So, if you don't have a local TAFE or equivalent, there's heaps of things. In fact, in Australia, there's something called the College of Garden Design or something, which they're not a full-blown diploma or, some kind of graduate course. They are actually things intended for more of the hobby designer.
Yeah. Well, and, also with the TAFE stuff, and I'm sure you can do this sort of thing at Bunnings, is I did a one-day do-it-yourself paving course. So you took your lunch.
Gee, that would have been fun.
It was amazing.
Oh, really?
It was amazing because I wanted to do all my own paving and I just needed to learn the basics. In one day, I learnt how far down do I dig? What does road base look like? When I go and buy a product, what am I actually buying and looking for? What sort of sand? Did you know there's about 10 different types of sand out there?
Oh, I did know this. Yeah. And this is why I've made the decision that I'm paying someone to do paving because it's a horrible job.
No, it's fantastic because once you get all the groundwork done, the paving itself is an absolute delight.
Well, once you get that extra sense of satisfaction, I'm much happier with a professional where I know that it's going to be flat and smooth and, that there hasn't been any issues that I've just avoided.
My paving's flat and smooth because I've been taught how to do it.
I know, but we won't have this argument online. I think
the key point of this is you've got to be motivated.
Yeah.
And I was motivated. And also you've got to invest the time. If you want to save money, then you're not about saving time.
The trade-off is about time.
That's it. And your time is now less valued in your mind than the time of somebody else. So
that's right.
So you're not prepared to pay someone else for their time, but you're not paying yourself for your time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I guess the other thing I was going to say is YouTube is another really good place to find things. And even in terms of the garden design, short excerpts where they say, if you're thinking about how you lay out your garden, this is the way that you do it and how you think about all the things that you've actually currently got in your garden that you may or may not want to keep there.
Yeah.
So I think we've done lots on the design.
Yeah, and really, just to sum that out, it's about self-education.
Yeah.
So the resources are out there and it's up to you to draw them. Books.
Remember that thing?
Magazines.
Yeah,
books.
That's right.
There's so much out there, but you've got to take the time to invest in order to save the money. So, a couple of $100 on a design course, that might save you, $10,000 on having someone to come in and do that for you.
Exactly. Okay, so now we've designed. Now, how do we do the building and the material acquisition?
Well, material acquisition, once again, if you invest the time to go out to landscaping yards and you select your materials, you weigh up different options, you maybe order things online. There's so many different ways you do it where if you do it yourself, you're not paying a landscaper that extra 20% margin for them to select, arrange delivery and to pay up front. So they're carrying that risk and liability on their business. You're not paying that. So you're saving yourself a lot of money.
That's right. And the other thing that you can do is you can shop around for products that are very similar that might actually be cheaper. And it's amazing the similarity of some products that you find out there where there's a more expensive option that you can avoid it but get exactly the same kind of look.
Yeah. Actually, this is probably where you also go into your local Gumtree and Facebook Marketplace type of environment.
Buy nothing groups.
Buy nothing groups. People are just pulling up driveways all the time, like, say
pavers.
courtyards, and they just want it gone.
Pebbles.
Pebbles, truckloads of pebbles.
That's
own
right.
a trailer.
Extra mulch, all of those things. Gravel.
You can get most of your garden for just seconds,
but it won't.
If you're not too picky.
I was about to say, if you're not too picky, and also if you're willing to wait, because it won't all happen when you need it immediately. So you'll probably have to have a bit of space to either stockpile or the time to just relax between, doing bits and pieces in your garden while you're waiting to find something, if that's your sourcing method.
And one little anecdote is when I was doing a knockdown rebuild, and the knockdown house was made of Canberra Reds, which for those listeners who are outside of Canberra, they are a clay brick that's been manufactured in Canberra
and
100 years ago or something, and they're beautiful looking, and they're really they're all marked Canberra. And they've got the dates on them. They're just a really lovely old heritage brick.
They are, and they're super expensive now because everyone wants them.
Yeah, well, I was doing a knockdown, and I put my sort of the whole house onto sort of local classifieds. I said, come and take what you need because the whole thing's about to be demolished. Anyway, this family, they came and they chipped away. I was worried the whole roof was going to fall in because they took the walls down.
Wow.
And they retrieved all the bricks.
Because I was going to say to you, I actually did one of my old houses, my entire backyard in Canberra Reds as well. I spent weekends at the concrete recyclers with my chisel and my hammer cleaning the bricks and taking them then from there, because it was the cheapest way to do it and the easiest way to do it rather than having to try and source them, because they go for significant dollars now per brick.
I think they're like $3 a brick or something.
Yeah, which is expensive when you need
like thousands of them.
Yeah, that's right, hundreds, thousands.
So the point there really is your time has to be less important than otherwise the cost.
I had nothing better to do on my weekends than sit in a concrete recycler.
And that's all part of it. You actually, because you're investing a lot of time, you start to really own the process, and that's really satisfying.
And think of that when you sell the house. There's half of your life is there in time and bricks. Anyway, so obviously that's, I guess, the key places. But the other places you can find materials sometimes, if you've got a local recycling place, like we have a green shed in Canberra, they will have some materials there. Less so than some of the online groups, though, because people don't tend to move bulk stuff out to those places.
Yeah, well, Green Shed is just a really exciting place to go. So for us in Canberra, it's called the Green Shed, and basically what it is, it's right next to the tip, and there's a group of, I think they're volunteers, and they take a lot of what would be going into landfill and they reallocate it into this green shed where you can go and just pick seconds and things like that you might use for your own projects.
And it's got everything there, from suitcases to
old bikes, doors,
I almost said
windows.
Use toothbrushes, but I don't think it gets to that level.
No, I don't think so. Kids' clothes, and it's actually been a source of family outings for us. Where if we've had a little bit, when the kids were little, we'd
I just made a face at Fleur. You can't see that. I'm thinking,
it's like
surely she can afford
Sunday
something better.
afternoon, the kids might be inclined to go onto their devices. Hey, kids, let's go out to the green shed. And they're like, woohoo, because they find treasures.
Yeah, of course. And it is the kind of place that you find all sorts of things that you can repurpose as pots and planters and sculptures and all of those things too.
Yes. That's right. So Green Shed's fantastic. In fact, one of the things I always comment on when I show people around my garden is there's a little section there that I got. It's basically a trellis that has two sides and a top, and it's made of recycled bed frames. So they're the metal ones that look like a trellis. And when I point it out to people, I say, look, that's just 3 bed frames zip tied together. Like, no way.
I have to say, I've never looked at it and thought, gee, that's a bed. So it is very well
three
disguised.
beds.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you have colour. You've painted it.
No, it comes like that. Really? It's powder coated black.
Oh, okay.
So it's already weatherproofed.
Yep. Interesting.
Which is why a bed needs to be weatherproof. But anyway, it is. It's weatherproof. It's
it
perfect.
was an outdoor bed.
Yeah, I mean, it's hollow tubing aluminium, and it's all powder coated. It's like perfect. And it cost a total of those 3 bed frames, which are, it's a metre and maybe 2 metres.
They're quite tall.
They're quite tall. And they're wide as a single bed. And so that whole structure cost me, I think, $1.50. I think they were 50 cents each for a bed frame.
That's a cheap bed frame.
I know.
Wow.
So it's like, look for things that you don't necessarily think are suited for that outdoor use, and then how can you apply them?
Right, and I think one of the things that everyone will have seen is people using the concrete reinforcing that steel Rio
Yes.
as trellises and frames for things. And even, most people just have a piece in their veggie patch if they've got something that climbs up it. But they are actually really nice when they go nice and rusty. If you've got a spot in your garden where you actually want to either create a screen or you want something climbing up it, they are a fantastic piece. And there's always stuff like that in builders' tips. One of the other things actually that I was going to say, it's not necessarily reusing and recycling, so I am moving away from that theme. But one of the things I used in our garden, because we kind of ran out of money when we got to the letterbox, and we've had some beautiful stonework done, and I wanted to reflect that in the letterbox, but didn't want to pay for a letterbox because we had no money at that point. And so we actually got gabion cages, and then filling the gabion cages really helped to, and for those of you that don't know what they are basically a wire cage that you fill with something, and often it's stone, or it might be people have used, and in fact, because I do some ceramics, at the place that I do ceramics, they've actually used old ceramic pieces in it.
Nice.
And you can fill it pretty much with whatever you want. And obviously you can use stone from your local area. And so I used gabion cage to build the letterbox, because you can buy the frame of a letterbox. And that's another cheap way of doing something which is sort of blended with the surroundings and reflected the natural landscape too.
Yeah, look, I've seen those gabion cages used extensively because they are a lot cheaper, and you can lay them very easily as long as you have the side that you want to be seen done in a nice rock.
That's right.
And then you just fill them with
Whatever.
builder's rubble.
Yes.
Which is another very cheap
That's right.
stuff.
It took me
Yeah.
a very long time though to fill that,
Oh,
to
yeah.
actually get the stone looking like reasonable from the outside was a lot of work.
Well, that's part of this theme, is your time is cheap
That's
if you want
right.
to save money.
I actually think that went beyond time to resilience. It took a
But
long
every time
and
you drive up your
patience.
driveway, don't you just admire your
No,
letterbox?
because I've now got a star jasmine that's covered the whole thing. Anyway, there's a lesson. Don't plant a star jasmine on something you spent a lot of time on. But I think there's a lot that we've come up with in terms of the materials people can use. I was going to say one of the other things that's in my garden, and I absolutely love them. I have somewhere around Canberra is someone who makes didgeridoos, and we got some old didgeridoos at one point, which were his cast-offs, and we've turned them into sculptures in the garden. And they kind of look like these weird organic wooden things growing out of the garden. And they are my favourite sculpture. So reimagining
Yes.
how other things are used, I think is another thing that is a really good way, instead of going out and buying that super expensive piece of art, which is really nice to have.
But I think this is a good one to talk about when it comes to sculpture and focal points and really high impact ones. Talk to us and describe to us about your ski chair.
Oh, so I'm a very keen skier, and obviously Canberra's only about 2.5 hours from the snow. And at one point they were decommissioning a chair, one of the chairlifts, where I had great fond memories of this chairlift and, sitting on there recovering after some of the runs, and as a teenager particularly sitting on them, being silly as a teenager is. And so we bought one of the chairs and we've put it and it is our focal point. As you look straight out our garden, there's a chairlift hanging there, which goes to our love of skiing and adds a bit of interest in the garden as well. I'm not sure it's everyone's cup of tea though.
But you know what I love about it is it says your personality, and as soon as you walk into the house, or as soon as you see that in the focal point in the garden, there's a immediate discussion, like it's a interest point. People want to talk about it.
True.
It's interesting, and it is really, but goes to the heart of who you are.
That's true.
And also, I imagine it was quite a thrifty sculpture. Was it? I guess having it set up on the post is a bit expensive.
Yeah, I think ultimately it wasn't that thrifty at all.
But
if I'd done it
it's
myself,
reused. I like that. It's recycled.
Exactly. If
Yeah.
we're staying with that theme, it fits in there. Money, not so much.
Yeah. And I think that's for listeners, you've got to pick things that are true to you.
Yeah,
things
that's
that you
right.
just love and you can really repurpose. In fact, one little anecdote. I'm just working on a garden at the moment where there's a pergola that was built by the client's father-in-law, and she said it was really sentimental to her, even though it's just a simple pergola, but the fact that it was
So a wooden pergola.
a wooden pergola, and it was just it was a point in time and that's sentimental, and we need to remove that pergola now to build something else. But I said to her, well, let's take some of that pergola and refashion it into a sculpture. And we're doing just a really simple sculpture, but she was so touched because it's about taking that sentimental, that memory and repurposing it into an effect that she'll just now look at and think, you know what, that makes me happy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that goes to that you've got that when you do it yourself and you're doing it with materials that you find, you've got that opportunity to incorporate the stuff that matters to you.
Yeah.
And that's the value that you get, and then you get the satisfaction of actually having done that.
Yeah.
So plants.
Yes, I was going to say. So we've really talked about kind of the design itself, how you can be more cost effective with doing your own design. We've talked about some elements of building materials and some sculptures and things to put in the garden. Now, plants are probably the next really big one.
They are, because they are pretty expensive. I mean, obviously
you're starting from scratch.
Yeah, that's right. But your hardscaping is always your most expensive. But then the plants can add up super quickly, particularly if, you're looking at the reasonably established things that you might buy from nurseries. So tell me what you did in your garden, Fleur, because I know you were thrifty about this
I've
stuff.
been very thrifty. Well, the first thing that that really came to me as a good idea was taking cuttings from other people's gardens. And when I set up my own garden, so many people, because I just had so much empty space, so many people were like, oh, well, look, why don't you come and take some of this, take some of this. Worked really well. Hardwood cuttings from perennials, fantastic, like salvia. They took off really easily. Ground covers are terrific. You've just got to be patient.
In fact, not only yesterday, did I steal some ground cover from Fleur's garden, from my mother's garden where she's got a patch.
That's it. And, the idea of just sharing, I can walk around my garden and I can say, oh, yeah, that's from so-and-so. Oh, yeah, that was from so-and-so. Oh, they don't have that garden anymore, but I've got part of their garden in my garden.
That's right.
And everything tells a story.
Son of.
Yes.
It is. And so I did a lot of that as well. The other thing I did was take seeds from people. So in the same vein where, for instance, particularly some of the annual plants that seed nicely, that's where I got a lot of those things from rather than actually having to purchase them.
Yeah. And then as you get more into this, I've found that, you get friends that are gardeners and they'll pot things up for you.
That's right.
And I've got some gems from some lovely friends, and I'm thinking particularly one, little shout out to Attila. Thank you. He's put some awesome things into my garden. Thank you. And I love them because they're his personality in my garden. They just belong, and it's just a lovely little feature.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, there's also you end up with things in your garden as a gardener, because I at one point pruned my maples and I was using the pruned sticks to keep the birds out of my veggie patch, and I stuck them in the really nice rich veggie patch soil and they all started sprouting baby maples. So Fleur has a few of those. I'm not sure if they survived because I was a bit rough when I pulled them out, but those kind of things, those kind of things. And a maple is, you go into a shop and it will cost you a fair bit of money. So don't dismiss how easy it is to build up some gardening content.
Absolutely. The and the joy of the sharing. And once again, we have Facebook groups in Canberra, everywhere does, but there's one particular, it's called Buy Nothing Garden in ACT, and people share plants all the time.
That's true.
Because, even when you're pruning, you say, look, I've just got all these cuttings, or there's always someone who wants something that you have. And also people put out requests, say, anyone getting rid of this, or this, I really want it. And amazing that it just tips someone to say, look, I've been meaning to get rid of that, come and get it.
Just make sure you don't put any of the invasive weeds up there as, here's something to spread a bit further around Canberra or wherever you live. But I was going to say, that brings me to one of the things I think, and it goes back to this element of if you're doing it yourself, you need the time. Because often you only need to buy one or two of something, and eventually with time they will multiply. And I'm thinking about things like bulbs. Because, I started off with probably too many bulbs and now I have thousands of bulbs and I don't need them all. So if you have the time, just wait for them to multiply. Succulents are exactly the
ground
same.
Ground covers.
That's right. Plenty of things that fit that bucket as well. So it is about time. Yeah. And I think that takes us probably to the other piece that we haven't talked about yet is tube stock and buying tube stock. So basically what we mean by tube stock is the really small plants. So the things that a nursery might have grown from a cutting that come in those tiny
little
pots.
80 mil pots.
Yeah, 7 or 8 mil centimetre pots,
Yeah.
and they're usually so much cheaper than anything that is established. And you can buy, 10 plants for the amount of one established plant potentially.
Well, when I planted the hedge that goes right round the front of my garden, I chose to do Pittosporum, which works for me. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I ordered those all online as tube stock, and it was something like 60 hedge plants, and they arrived in one small shoebox. and I remember the guy coming in. I said, "Is there another box?" He goes, "No, that's it." And I was like, "Oh." Really? And I opened up and they all had like about 3 leaves on them each, and I planted them all out thinking, you've got to be joking. And I had this massive big gate that was set between the hedges, and people were like, "What have you got a gate here for?" And I'm like, "Don't step on the hedge." Like, what hedge? Yeah, there's the hedge. And now,
huge.
I have to keep them at about 1.6 metres, and they're really thick, and they're extremely, it's privacy and wind protection, and that's been in about 5 years to get to their full height.
And they are fast growing. I mean, they are a particularly fast growing species, but it goes back to this. You've got to have the time and patience to wait for tube stock to grow.
Now, I want to just tell you quickly about a guy I met the other day. I was pulling out Lomondra. I had all these lime tufts that I bought, and they ended up being too much in one space, and I just needed to thin them out. And I put them on Gumtree. Now, for those listeners, Gumtree is our local marketplace. Yeah, it's a place where people can just buy things cheaply. Anyway, a fellow turned up and he said, "Oh, I've come to get them to put them in my Gumtree garden." And I said, "Oh, so you're doing all natives?" Like, "Oh, that must be really nice." He said, No, my Gumtree garden is my entire garden that's been planted from Gumtree giveaways.
I like it.
I was like, that is good.
That is impressive.
And he said to me, and he showed me photos, and it was just this sort of lush oasis of, mass planting and lots of things. He said, "I've been working on it for years, but my entire garden's cost me, a few $100s.
Gee, that's impressive, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it goes back to this time and patience thing, because it would have taken him time and patience to get there.
And he has to drive around and pick up plants select and wait till things come on. But you know what?
He's got a good bit of dinner party conversation, doesn't he?
Let me check out my Gumtree garden. That's right. But the point is, it's out there, and there's lots of opportunity. That you can really breed. You can create a fantastic garden. You've just got to start with a design, get a few skills, educate yourself, work out how to build things, educate yourself, spend some time.
That's right.
And you can have a great garden for a really good budget price.
You sure can. The last thing because we didn't really touch on this when we were talking about materials, is, and I guess it goes beyond the getting the garden in place, and it goes into the maintenance as well. Then you can keep your costs down by composting, by having a worm farm, by getting manure and other, additions like that from nearby stables or farms that might be selling that stuff way cheaper than buying the plastic wrapped bags than in Bunnings, and better quality.
Way cheaper. And if you've got if you're cutting down branches or whatever, and you can wood chip them, stockpile them for a while till they break down, and they make a great. And it's the autumn leaves. We gather,
of course.
We sweep up all our autumn leaves, make leaf mould, put them in the compost. And they are
They're gold.
They're gold. They are the mulch. That I don't buy mulch. They are my mulch.
Yeah.
And that with some wood chips that I make, and that's it. I never buy any materials into my garden now.
Yeah, which is a great way to go, because some of the materials you buy, I don't know. Have you seen there's a fantastic thing on Facebook at the moment with someone who's been, I think it's actually a nursery, they're promoting their own soil, but they've done a test of all of these different brands of soils and composts that you can buy. And, of course, theirs has come out best. But it is fascinating because there are some very ubiquitous brands in there which are doing so badly. So you're not necessarily buying great quality, and it does seem to be the price you pay reflects what you get at these places too.
Yeah, and that probably goes to that point of knowing when not to budget.
Yes.
Yeah, and things like the soil mixes, which are probably really important. Well, really, the best way is to generate the compost yourself. And to mix it in with the soil that you have, and just to ameliorate that soil.
But if you've got large quantities, then that's not necessarily going to be possible. The soil is such a foundation for your garden. You might want to spend your money on that rather than buying the established trees and find your savings on tube stock.
Yeah, and I'd suggest find your savings on tube stock rather than on electrical and plumbing.
So, yeah, I think that's really important. The other thing that I just wanted to quickly say, because I think people sometimes forget, but you cannot take stuff from the bush. And it's really important because all of the things in the bush are either, species that need to be there because they're feeding some animal or insect. And it's also habitat, all those rocks and everything else. Even though they look beautiful and they've got moss all over them, it's exactly what you want and you don't want to spend the money.
Actually, it's good to emphasise it's not just about digging up plants in the bush, but it's about taking logs and sticks and rocks and all that sort of stuff, because the whole thing is an ecosystem.
Exactly. I think we're probably there, Fleur. This has gone super fast.
It's such an interesting topic,
It
and
is.
I really hope. And what I'd love to hear from listeners is drop us some feedback on our Instagram page or through the podcast Interact page, and let us know what are some of the budget things you've done in your garden.
Yes, because we'd love to steal your ideas. Let's be
We just want to
blatant.
hear about it. Or if we've triggered something for you to say, look, I've now got the confidence to go out and do one of those courses and get going with my own garden. I'd just love to hear that feedback. And also just any ideas that you might have that you want us to talk about, because we can really talk to the end of the earth.
I was going to say, we've got so much that we can talk about, and we would love to talk about something that's important to you.
That's right. Otherwise, we'll just keep coming up with our own fascinating topics, which we think are useful.
Yes.
So we look forward to sharing those with you next time.
And we will talk to you in a fortnight.
Wonderful. See you
See you
then.
later.